Bonjour tout le monde, bonne semaine nationale de la fonction publique et bienvenue à cet épisode de mon balado Perspective avec Paul. Je suis Paul Thompson, sous-ministre d'Emploi et de Développement social. I am really excited about today's episode because we have a really special guest with us today. I am honored to be joined here in our studio in Gatineau by John Hannaford, Clerk of the Privy Council. John a été nommé greffier en juin 2023. Auparavant, il a été sous-ministre du ministère des Ressources naturelles et aussi sous-ministre du Commerce international et Affaires mondiales Canada. So a deep background in being deputy minister in multiple departments and recently appointed as our clerk. John, I'm really thrilled that you've joined us here today for the podcast.
I'm just delighted to be here.
Well, that's great. We've got lots to talk about. I want to dive into lots of topics. Hybrid work is very much on the minds of employees, so I want to get into that. I want to get into the values and ethics dialogue, the really important dialogue that you've launched. I want to hear your perspectives on that and more. But peut-être de commencer avec la Semaine nationale de la fonction publique.
Oui,
Pourquoi est-ce que c'est important à vous de célébrer dans cette semaine et les accomplissements de la fonction publique?
Je pense pour moi, c'est vraiment une opportunité d'avoir un moment de réflexion sur les accomplissements, comme vous avez dit, mais aussi sur les défis qui sont réels pour nous comme communauté. Et pour moi, la semaine est un symbole de notre communauté et les valeurs qui sont pertinentes pour nous comme une profession et comme une série d'organisations aussi. Parce que nous sommes dans une situation assez difficile, je dirais. Il y a une série de défis qui sont pertinents pour nous, soit géopolitiques, soit climatiques, mais aussi il y a une série de perspectives concernant l'institution d'une certaine part de notre société en général. Pas en général, ça c'est pas le cas, dans certaines parties de notre société. Et pour nous, c'est vraiment important de reconnaître les défis et les raisons pour lesquelles nos services sont absolument essentiels. Et pour célébrer les accomplissements et pour chercher les moyens d'améliorer les services et améliorer les interactions en avoir entre nous et avec la population en général.
Oui, c'est quelque chose qu'on devrait faire pour toute l'année, pas seulement dans une semaine, mais la semaine est une grande occasion de le faire, absolument. So maybe I'll turn to my second topic that I wanted to dig into. A very important priority for you right off the bat was values and ethics. So you launched a dialogue. Of course, people, I hope, know the 5 core values: respect for democracy, respect for people, integrity, stewardship, and excellence. We've launched a pretty significant dialogue here at ESDC within branches, within functional communities, within our executive cadre. Maybe you could just share with us why you think this dialogue is so important, and where do you think it will lead? What's your objective?
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, as you said at the outset, I've been in this job now for about a year, and I really felt when I took the job that, for all the reasons I just mentioned, like we are in a challenging situation. This is, I think, one of the most kind of dynamic contexts for governance that we've seen probably since the Second World War. Mm-hmm. And one of the features of that is there are a series of things that kind of create pressure for us as a profession and as a series of organizations. As I mentioned, there's geopolitical, there's the effects of climate, there's technological change, there's still some of the implications of the pandemic. Those things all, in and of themselves, are kind of challenging. But then taken together, and as they interact and as they change quickly, it's a moment, and it's something that puts us in situations where we are often confronting things that are new, and we are often confronting profound challenges and choices that need to be made in order to serve the country that we serve. And I really felt that in those sorts of situations, I've always found personally that if you fall back on what it is you're trying to achieve, if you remind yourself of what your kind of core objectives are, that's a pretty powerful guide for what you should then do in an individual situation. And I think, in the context of all of those challenges I just mentioned, I think going back to what our core purposes are as reflected in the code that was brought together by John Tate around 25 years ago, that was a pretty good place to start. And if you look at those, democracy, people, stewardship, excellence, integrity, those are as valid today as they were when the code was developed. But of course, they take on kind of different meanings in the current context. And that was the reason why I thought we really need to foster this conversation across the government, but then very deep within organizations. And I'm really pleased that the work that you and your team have been doing here, because I think it's not just an abstract exercise. Yeah. It is a conversation that needs to happen at all levels of every organization. And the other piece of this, and I think it's actually kind of critical, is we have grown as an institution significantly over the course of the last period of time. And the folks that joined us from the pandemic on had a very different experience of coming on board than you and I had when we joined, whenever it was, far too long ago. My kids have sort of begun to kind of work their way into the workforce. My eldest child had started a job in that period. And I was very conscious watching them of the kind of requirement for institutions to think about how we make sure that people who are joining the institution are aware of the kind of core purposes and feeling that sense of how they are contributing to a greater good.
So I think this layered approach is particularly important. This is a very large, complicated organization, ESDC, almost 40,000 people. When you think of the diversity of functions that they have, those values and ethics play out in very different ways. If you're an integrity officer enforcing the rules, if you're a grants and contributions specialist, if you're writing MCs for the minister, these are very different. 100%. So to make it real, I really do think it needs that depth of discussion that you've
that's it. And look, I mean, I think we also need to be conscious. We're here in the National Capital Region, but of course there are very different experiences across the country and around the world. We have colleagues who are serving in all sorts of different settings, and their experience and the sort of challenges that they're facing will be very different. And so that, again, that was the reason why I thought that having this.
So you frame it and then let it play out 100%. in different 100% communities.
And I don't. You were at our retreat where we talked about this a while ago, and Gina Wilson was saying at one of the early conversations we had in sort of launching this exercise, the power within her community of stories and thinking through stories as norm-setting opportunities, where you think about a set of facts and you think about what that means in terms of sort of your core values and your core ethics. And I think that those stories are going to be kind of relevant at a unit level or at a more specific level than they would be in every other setting across government. So there's, again, another reason to kind of foster that conversation at all levels.
Right. Very good. Maybe a bit of a connection into our next topic, the hybrid work model. Mm-hmm. Lots of buzz around that these days with the changes that we've collectively introduced. Wouldn't mind hearing from you a bit what you see from your perspective, the value proposition of in-person experience and why that's so important for our institution of the public service.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think we've learned a lot over the course of the last period of time, and I think when you think back at the working environment that we were in prior to the pandemic, and now you think of where we are now, we've gone through quite a radical set of changes, which we did pretty quickly. And, we learned as we were going along through all of that, and we adjusted accordingly. And I think the current set of circumstances is another adjustment. It's not a return to where we were with, the realities prior to the pandemic. But it is recognizing that there are pretty profound values to spending time together. And there's also flexibilities that are part of the work environment that we have seen the benefits of. And so we want to make sure that we capture both of those things. And, the original guidance when we looked at a sort of cross the system direction as to what we should be expecting of ourselves, was 2 to 3 days. The current guidance is just to standardize that to 3 days, which is an adjustment within the parameters that we'd always talked about. I think there's a value to consistency across the system so that we all have a pretty clear sense as to what it is that we should expect. But I think it's also important that we be talking on our teams as to how we then use that time together to their best effect. Because what we did prior to, and this actually does go to the values and ethics piece fairly profoundly. Like I think of when I started my job in '95. It was essentially an apprenticeship. Like we were following around people who were more experienced.
Spontaneous interactions
100%.
And what you learned from that.
100%. And you think back, the most important lessons I learned were really from those kind of experiential things where you went and watched people do their jobs. And those would be lessons both positive and negative, to be honest, but they were lessons that we learned. And I think we need to remember that on the one hand, and think then about how we make sure we are maximizing the benefit of our time together in order to reinforce some of those learning opportunities. Think about mentorship, think about community, think about sort of values, and think about how we make sure that we are reinforcing the ties that bind, because ultimately, this is a team sport. Like we have to, in order for us to be effective, we have to be working effectively together. And I think that time together is one of the ways of reinforcing that, recognizing that there's still flexibility around it.
Absolutely. And been having these discussions with folks, and it's about much more than just the sum total of our individual productivity. It's about the health of the institution and the learning we do collectively, and it's our collective performance, not just about our individual performance, right? So,
exactly. And like for me, it's not even about it. We need to think of this over a time horizon too. There's a trajectory to the work that we do together, and I think for the longer term health of the organization, spending a bit of time together is actually critical to us feeling those relationships that then sustain us over the course of a period of time. We're a more resilient organization if we are spending time together.
Yeah. So as a deputy community, we of course get together every week, and I value those in-person meetings. I usually have a list of all the people I want to have little side conversations with, and it's very efficient. And again, those spontaneous interactions. OK, un autre sujet important pour moi, comme vous savez bien, je pense, je suis le champion, président de la campagne de charité au milieu de travail pour le gouvernement du Canada. J'ai une coprésidente, Nancy Hamzawe, de l'Agence publique de la santé. Nous avons eu des plans pour une campagne passionnante. Il y a des défis dans la campagne de charité avec le niveau des dons des employés, mais c'était une campagne extraordinaire la semaine dernière, 29 millions de dollars pour beaucoup de charités. Vous étiez président il y a 2 ans, je pense. Avez-vous des réflexions à partager l'importance de campagne, le rôle dans la vie de la fonction publique?
Absolument. Pour moi, c'était une occasion pour réflexion, comme la semaine de la fonction publique, en effet, parce que c'est un moment de reconnaître la prospérité, dans un certain sens, de notre communauté. Nous sommes vraiment chanceux d'avoir de travail, nous sommes à voir. Et en même temps, nous sommes membres d'une communauté en général, ici au Ottawa, mais dans le pays en général. Et il y a une gamme de défis pour le pays en général. Et un aspect de notre vie comme fonctionnaire est d'avoir un désir d'aider. Et ceci est une occasion d'aider et d'avoir un impact dans un autre sens. Et c'est aussi une occasion pour célébration parce qu'il y a une série d'événements au sein de campagne qui est important pour renforcer les liens entre nos équipes. Et ça, c'était important pour moi comme président aussi. Alors, c'est inspirant en général de la campagne. Et c'est vraiment spécial, un aspect de notre travail ensemble.
Great. So I'm certainly looking forward to that role and a successful campaign. let's turn to just how we manage our lives as busy public servants, work-life balance. So you and I, well, actually, we discovered fairly recently that we have a bit of a shared history that our parents were teachers, school teachers in Toronto, in fact, at the same school.
Yeah.
And part of that community, they were very passionate about the outdoors.
Yeah.
And that was certainly inbred in me as a young 100%. Person, spending time around the lake and just enjoying nature. And that's part of my DNA, and that's certainly how I try to find balance. But is that important to you? And
oh my God, yes.
And what other aspects of life how do you balance the daily pressures?
Yeah. Well, we do share that. I grew up, my parents had a cottage north of Toronto, and that was where I spent. Part of the benefit of having parents as teachers was we had 2 months.
Exactly.
And so 2 months at the cottage every year, that was pretty fundamental to my sense of place. And my parents are sadly now gone, but the cottage is now mine. And that sense of attachment to nature and to a specific place as well.
It stabilizes you. It's like an unchanging, it's permanent feature, right?
It is profound.
Yeah.
Absolutely profound. So that's a critical part of my own makeup. But I think I'm a keen reader too. I love reading, and I read a fair bit of fiction these days. And I've actually come to the view that reading fiction, for me anyway, is important for a number of reasons. I think it takes you places that reading a briefing note doesn't, and it forces you to think about things and put yourself in situations that are obviously different than the lives we live. And I think it fosters imagination in a way that is helpful. So for me, that's another aspect of I try and I always have several books on the go, and that's something that I find is extraordinarily important to me as well. And, my family is very important. We're about to get a dog, and that's going to be both distracting and lovely. And
if not mistaken, you like cooking.
I'm a very keen cook.
So that's another, I find that a nice distraction.
Oh, my, yes.
Too, just to get your head out of a briefing note of the crisis of the day. And
exactly. It's exactly right. There's something sort of meditative about cooking, because you just do the thing that's in front of you, and you get it done, and you see the results of it. And those things are all critical too. What do you do? I mean, apart from the cottage?
Well, very much outdoors. I like to cook as well, so I find that a nice escape. The odd sporting activity. I play hockey throughout the winter. I've had a hockey team that I've been part of for over 30 years now.
Oh, good God!
And we're not very good. We're not improving with each year, but it's a complete escape, because you get out on the ice and you don't think about anything else other than getting the puck in the net. So it's very simple and primordial in a way. So that's a good escape as well.
Yeah. Yep.
So one of my traditions is turning the tables, and you just asked me one question. Anything else you want to pose to me?
Yeah, how are you finding the job? You've been here for we're roughly same timing. So coming up on a year. How have you found it?
It's been extraordinary. So for me, as you well know, this is a return, almost like a homecoming for me. It's my third time in the department. So I've seen the department in different episodes throughout my career. And coming back has been just really rewarding to get reacquainted with the amazing people in the organization. Like any organization, I think it was shaped very much by the pandemic. Mm-hmm. That was a big experience, and it's that had some painful moments, but also some learning moments. I think it's a very energetic, agile organization. Like we just stood up the big dental benefit, for example, and I can't imagine doing something at that pace prior to the pandemic. It's just kind of the reality that we work at I think a faster, more agile way to get things done. So I'm really impressed by that. But just the mandate of this department is one that just draws you in. It's what drew me into government in the first place. That was my first job. And just really happy to be part of this. We touched the lives of Canadians from childhood into retirement, and it's an amazing opportunity. So.
But can I ask you, you mentioned sort of different working methods that you're seeing now post-pandemic, but what has changed that way? Like, how are people doing their jobs that are different, and what are their lessons from that?
I just think there's an expectation of working at the speed of the world now.
Yeah.
Like the world went so fast during the pandemic, and I think there's that reality that we have to think of new ways of getting things done. I think there's been more and more focus of late on execution of work. So I think we've been honing our skill sets on that.
Yep.
Just our playbook and our craft is getting a bit better at execution. We've got more to do on that. It's still a rare skill set, but we're growing it, and so I'm pleased to see that. And we've got other important communities of not only implementing new things, but the day-to-day service delivery and building that culture is inspiring to see. We've got thousands of dedicated employees that are on the front lines, managing difficult calls from clients or visits into our Service Canada centres. That's challenging and rewarding work, and it's inspiring just to see it get done too.
So what would you say is the biggest challenge right now?
Biggest challenge we've got. I think keeping up with the technology world is a huge issue. We're thinking a lot about artificial intelligence, for example. 100%. We want to be cautious. So my goal is I'd like to think about ways of freeing up public servants to do more value-added activities. There's so many things Canadians need to do. I'm intrigued at the idea of doing that, but we got to make sure that we're exemplary not only in adoption, but in the guardrails too. That we're respecting all those guardrails. So I see that as one of many challenges that we've got. The diversity inclusion agenda is another really important for us. That's where if I think about what was different now in the organization from before, it's a much more diverse organization over the period. So that is rewarding. And again, it's part of a journey and more to do there. Those are a few reflections.
Well, it's interesting because that fits with, I think, systems-wide experiences too. Like I, in the sense that on that last point, I think the progress that we've made. You think of the work that was done most immediately as a result of Ian Shugart's call to action and the follow-ups that were initiated by Janice. I do feel like we've changed the nature of the organization in a lot of really positive ways. There's much more work to be done, but I think that I was struck. I can't even remember what the issue was, but one of those deputy weeklies we had, I don't think he would mind us saying, Daniel Kwan-Watson was saying that as a result of sort of diversity around that table, we're having different conversation than we would have had some time ago. And that's something that I think is remarkable and worth kind of recognizing as we continue to deal with those issues.
And when I talk to folks at all levels in the organization, they take a lot of comfort in the fact of seeing changes in the senior management cadre, because it feeds on itself and creates safer spaces and more comfort and career growth opportunities for others. So that's important. Okay, so those were the hard questions. So now we're going to go to another segment of the podcast. This is our rapid fire. J'aime conclure chaque balado par une série de questions en rafale ou du genre que préférez-vous? Est-ce que vous êtes prêts?
Je pense que oui.
Okay. Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes?
Mahomes.
Okay. Cabin, we touched on this one maybe already. Cabin in the woods or house near the beach?
A cabin in the woods.
Predicted that one. Nirvana or Foo Fighters?
Nirvana.
Okay. Takeout or eating in a restaurant? Or you might have a third choice, make your own.
Yeah, actually, my preference is make my own, but I like a restaurant.
Okay, very good. Are you a sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise.
Okay. Board games or card games?
I'm not a great games person, but board games more than cards.
Okay. Les séries éliminatoires de la Ligue nationale de hockey ou la NBA?
Hockey.
Okay. A great game last night with
exactly.
Edmonton pulling it through. Une samedi en détente à la maison ou d'aventure?
Samedi en maison.
OK. Une autre que vous avez déjà mentionné, lire un livre ou écouter une balado?
Lire un livre.
Except for the Perspectives.
Oh, of course.
podcast.
Yes. That's always the exception.
The exception. La bière ou le vin?
Vin.
OK. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you, John. Really happy that you were able to join us today. Et je voudrais remercier toute l'audience de Balado. Vous pouvez écouter mes balados précédents sur mon site internet Perspective avec le sous-ministre Paul Thompson. J'espère que vous allez y jeter un coup d'œil. I just also want to note that we're happy to hear from employees too in terms of feedback on the podcast. So that is an opportunity. So until next time, merci beaucoup.